If an individual is a bodybuilder, physique athlete, and they are somebody who has struggled with their body composition their whole life. They went through puberty obese, they come from, fat gene line in terms of just like increased metabolic disease and just general adiposity in their family. Let's say they've also struggled to have any semblance of a healthy relationship with their menstrual cycle. They're usually somebody who's prone to anovulatory menstrual cycles, hyperthecosis of the actual ovaries. So theca cells are in overabundance. So LH is chronically high. They're not really great at aromatizing because that's what happens when we have this like supercharge of theca cells, which also translates into our fat cells as well. So you'll see them typically, even before using androgens, have a higher level of androgens with a moderate level of estrogens. But those estrogens we know are actually being predominantly produced in the fat cells, and low progesterone. And they've also struggled with their appetite regulation. Either maybe leptin's really high or leptin's really low. And they are now coming off this, like, what do people call it? Hero dose contest cycle of all these different androgens. They're starving because they've literally had to just completely go into this extreme hypocaloric zone. Could a GLP-1 actually be advantageous for them to use after they're done their show?
This is one of the instances where I feel very firm that it could be.
Mm-hmm,
And I think when we're talking about body fat regain for this kind of individual,
mm-hmm,
is it advantageous to have them allow hunger signaling to, I mean, truly, if we're talking about re-regulation, that might not be feasible if the individual
mm-hmm,
is going to be continuing in and out of this state, but
mm-hmm,
at least to a point where they have some semblance of regaining control over adherence. And I
mm-hmm,
think post-show is an instance where, depending on um, historically what the athlete has struggled with more specifically, is it the hunger signaling, is it the lack of motivation, is it the psychology, is the relationship to food,
mm-hmm,
depending on what behavior is truly the bottleneck, like what is that root cause. And I think that's an area where I mean, frankly, I mean, this is not where I thought you were going with this, but I'm so glad you did, because this is one that you see a lot of bodybuilders get so pissed when this is even in discussion around like GLP-1s being used for anyone within the sport.
mm-hmm,
And frankly, I'm like, if we have this framework of justification around drug use as a whole, and we're following this, I don't know, credence of like, this is okay, but this is not,
mm-hmm,
how is modifying a phase that at this point, I mean, like the recommendation is just suck it up, just
mm-hmm,
do better, just want
mm-hmm,
to not get fat bad enough, which realistically is we know physiologically is just so unreasonable. It's just so
mm-hmm,
insensitive to
mm-hmm,
approach it in that realm. I absolutely do think that there is application for that in the right context.
mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you start peeling back the layers, like there is so natural GLP-1 peptide, there is a relationship with it to estradiol. So estrogen, we know in healthy levels, helps to regulate feeding. It helps to regulate hunger and actually respond to our like say like our just overall fullness, and then also helps to affect our like insulin handling too of food, which then directly impacts our hunger signals. So there is a really tightly woven relationship between these two that's still becoming uh, highlighted by the research. There's some that has shown that like estradiol in women, again, we have to distinguish hormones work differently in men and women. So what we see in one population, we may not be able to extrapolate and compare it to the other. And that is a big thing in our industry that people do all the time. It drives me nuts, because there's so much different and uniqueness that we have to take into consideration here. How estradiol works in women is not going to be the same as how estradiol works in men in all systems. Some, yes, there's parallels, but not all. But with females, estradiol specifically, can enhance pancreatic beta cell function via estrogen receptors, the ER, We know that the beta cell
Mm,
function is incredibly important site that GLP-1s work on. So there's been some research that's shown that by targeting the beta cells with estrogen therapy, we actually can help increase GLP-1s naturally.
mm,
So that's one of
mhm,
those interesting relationships that it's like, to me, I'm like, that's so cool. I want to learn more about this because this I see could have huge potential then in people that we can't just throw estradiol at them right away because maybe they have a hormone mediated cancer, but we need to still be
mm,
able to support metabolic health. Maybe it's somebody who has been in such an estradiol deprived state that we have to bring up estradiol so low and slow so that we don't have any negative kind of hyper reactivities or sensitivities, but we still need to make sure that we're monitoring and managing their metabolic health. And so maybe it's also somebody, and again, this is where I feel like bodybuilders, sometimes I just want to smack them, is that like an eating disorder is a form of food addiction. And if you're not going to tell an alcoholic just to suck it up, do not tell somebody who's had an eating disorder just to suck it up. Maybe there's a bigger conversation that has to be had around whether the sport is actually healthy for them to do. But that's something that we have to do with grace and respect for them as an individual who's obviously struggling. But do not tell somebody who's had an eating disorder just to suck it up. Because I honestly will show you the research that says that that actually has massive implications for them, their mental health, not only today, but long
mm,
term. We don't even fully understand the pathways involved, but we do know that with people that have either binge eating or anorexia, that the opioid receptor is getting activated. No different than opioid receptors get activated in other forms of drug addiction. So, yes, maybe bodybuilding's not for them, but right now we need to give them a bridge to get them to a better mental and physical health space where they can make that decision on their own.
mm. That is one of the most refreshing takes I've heard on GLP-1s and their use, the application specifically for the physique athlete. So thank you so much for that.